By comparison with the British and French, Italy's empire was insignificant. There was Libya, but oil had not yet been discovered. Italy controlled Eritrea and Somalia, and adjacent to both was Ethiopia, for many years an object of Italian ambition.
People
used to say that Italy shouldn't conquer Ethiopia. Why not? Hadn't England done the same thing? It had conquered India, it had conquered the Middle East, it had conquered half the world. We used to say, why them and not us? We were all agreed on that point. We were all convinced that Italy too deserved its fair share of all that land around the world which till then had been shared out between England and France.
Ethiopia, ruled by the Emperor Haile Selassie, was poor, backward and a black. And it practiced slavery. In fascist eyes, therefore, Ethiopia was ripe for a white man's war of liberation. There were also economic arguments for conquest.
Mussolini needed more than just raw materials, which Italy totally lacked. Mineral water is the only thing that Italy has a lot of. He needed mines, he needed raw materials. He also needed land for Italy's increasing population.
Un territorio dove scaricare l'eccedenza di popolo che si sta verificando. Cioè, noi stiamo crescendo negli anni 30, l'Italia cresce demograficamente.
In the 30s, we were increasing in number quite a lot. We needed to find a place for millions of Italians across the waters. And that is why we went to Ethiopia.
Ecco perché si va a cercare l'Etiopia.
Before beginning his expansion into Ethiopia, Mussolini asked Britain and France for their permission. The French gave their consent through Laval in January 1935. The English, on the other hand, remained ambiguous for months.
A year earlier, Mussolini's daughter Edda had visited London. He had asked her how the British would react to an Italian invasion.
Before I left, my father said, "Tell everybody that we're going to Ethiopia. Tell everyone from the porter at the station to the taxi driver." I did tell everybody. As regards the ordinary people, they didn't even know where Ethiopia was. Basically, they didn't care. Then I met MacDonald, who was the Prime Minister at the time. I insisted on knowing if the English would go to war against Italy. He said no. Well, I said, that was my main concern. Fine, he said. Then I added, but will you take any action? Yes, of course, but we won't make war. That's settled, I replied. I don't know if we shook hands across the table. I can't remember. Then he said, let's go and have a cup of tea on the terrace.
Throughout the summer and autumn of 1935, an armada of Italian troopships sailed for Italy's colonial bases in Africa. The build-up began with 3 divisions. To be on the safe side, Mussolini raised it to 10.
Era una guerra dell'Italia in cui l'Italia era impegnata.
It was a war for Italy, and Italy was involved. The young ones, like myself, thought it was our duty to take part.
I nostri nonni, I nostri padri avevano fatto.
Our grandfathers and fathers had brought about the unification of Italy. We thought the moment had come when it was our duty to make Italy great.
On the 3rd of October, 1935, Italian troops invaded Ethiopia. It was the biggest and best equipped army ever to have fought in Africa. In all, 1.5 million men. Mussolini expected a walkover. But Ethiopia's lightly armed and barefooted soldiers resisted valiantly. Within weeks, the Italian advance bogged down. But rifles and spears were no match for modern weapons, and certainly no match for Italy's bombers. They had the sky to themselves. In a secret order, Mussolini approved the use of poison gas. In a convention ratified 7 years earlier, Italy had renounced chemical warfare as uncivilized, and its use in Ethiopia was kept from the public in Italy until after the war. When the news caused an outcry abroad, Italy issued denials. Photographs of victims of gas attacks were described by the Italian embassy in London as cases of leprosy. But the evidence could not be refuted, and Italy was condemned across the world. In the League of Nations, Britain led a futile attempt to restrain Mussolini by imposing limited sanctions.
Action must now be taken. It is for the members of the League of Nations collectively to determine what their reaction should be.
All but 4 member nations voted for sanctions. Nobody wanted collective military action to force Italy to withdraw.
In such action,
the sanctions were painful, but all the League accomplished was to consolidate Italian support for the war.
The Italians were deeply hurt and considered the sanctions a clear injustice and an obstacle in their rebuilding program. Mussolini had warned England and France of his plans in Ethiopia and had not been opposed. Instead, they later imposed sanctions.
The party launched a battle to beat sanctions. Following the example of the Queen, 250,000 Roman matrons handed in their golden wedding rings to swell the national reserves of bullion. Their husbands donated bedsteads to the cause, anything of metal, anything at all to feed the Duce's war machine. What Italians did not know was that the war and the collapse of Italy's foreign trade was wrecking the economic revival of the 20s. With victory in April 1936, there was blind rejoicing from the king and the pope to the crowds in the streets. Alone against the world, Italians had proved themselves as a nation of warriors. Rome was again the capital of an empire, and its creator Mussolini was admired and applauded as never before.
si esprime in questa semplice, irrevocabile, definitiva proposizione: l'Etiopia è italiana!